She initially dismissed the persistent itch on her neck as a minor, temporary annoyance. However, the discovery made by her doctors brought even the most seasoned surgeons to a halt, revealing a presence that was both anomalous and carried the weight of decades. Compounding the shock was the system's failure to assist her when she was most vulnerable. Margaret's discomfort had escalated over 3 weeks from a slight irritation to a palpable, walnut-sized lump that seemed to throb beneath her skin. Despite her attempts to rationalize it as an allergy or a sign of age, an underlying dread told her it was neither. Her daughter, Claire, who lived with her, noticed the worsening swelling and insisted on a doctor's visit, challenging her mother's reliance on prayer alone. Margaret, harboring a deep fear of hospitals and burdened by unspoken secrets, finally conceded out of growing fear. Experiencing symptoms like tremors and night sweats, her anxiety was compounded by a profound sense of shame. As if the lump were a physical manifestation of a past she had tried to bury, after mustering the courage, Margaret asked Claire to accompany her to the appointment, cryptically warning her not to be alarmed by what might be revealed about things from the past. This ominous statement left Claire deeply unsettled as they entered the cold, impersonal environment of the hospital waiting room. Clutching her daughter's hand for support, Margaret met with Dr. Thomas Reynolds. His expression grew serious as he examined the lump on her neck, prompting an urgent ultrasound. The scan revealed a dense, metallic object embedded in the tissue, a discovery that visibly shook Margaret. She whispered in distress, believing everything from her past had been removed, leaving Claire bewildered by the cryptic statement. The car ride home was enveloped in a heavy silence. Claire pressed her mother for an explanation about the metallic fragment and her strange reaction. But Margaret retreated into herself, burdened by a fear that the truth would alter her daughter's perception of her. That night, the pain in Margaret's neck intensified, triggering vivid flashbacks of a traumatic event involving smoke, screams, and shrapnel. Unable to sleep, she retrieved a hidden wooden box containing mementos that revealed her secret past as a civilian volunteer in a medical support unit during the Vietnam War. The next morning, a conversation with Dr. Reynolds confirmed the foreign nature of the object, deepening Claire's concern. She found her mother waiting with the antique box, which contained photos and an identification badge. Margaret finally confessed her long-hidden history, explaining that she was wounded during a bombing raid and had shrapnel removed at the time, but evidently, a fragment remained. She revealed she had carried this physical and emotional burden for over 40 years. Silenced by a society that did not acknowledge her experience and by her own desire to forget the trauma, Claire was left speechless, grappling with the realization of her mother's hidden pain and the profound silence that had separated them for so long. The MRI confirmed the presence of a long, twisted metal fragment lodged near a critical nerve. Dr. Reynolds explained the urgent need for surgery, as the object's movement posed a severe risk to Margaret's vital functions. Though the procedure was dangerous, Margaret, facing the physical manifestation of her buried past, agreed to it. On the drive home, when Claire asked if she had ever been afraid of dying, Margaret revealed that her true fear was not of death, but of being forgotten. This profound admission prompted Claire to pull the car over, overwhelmed by the weight of her mother's confession. Margaret's poignant request for her story to be told resonated deeply with Claire, forging a new understanding between them. In the days leading up to the surgery, Margaret privately revisited a decades-old, unsent letter addressed to a man named Robert Carter, a relic from her time in Vietnam that revealed a lifelong burden of unknown fate and loss. Claire, in turn, actively sought to validate her mother's past, discovering records that officially acknowledged Margaret's service, a recognition that moved Margaret to tears as she finally felt seen. Their final days together were marked by a quiet, solemn preparation. Margaret seemed to be consciously absorbing the simple details of her life, while Claire provided silent, steadfast support. On the eve of the operation, Margaret made 2 promises: to share her full story upon waking and, implicitly, for Claire to become the keeper of that history if she did not. This moment cemented a profound bond, united not just by family but by a shared commitment to truth. Margaret viewed the upcoming surgery as a final reckoning, a physical extraction of the ignored pain and history she had carried for so long. After a quiet prayer for strength and purpose, she arrived at the hospital with a resolute calm. Claire, visibly tense and sleep-deprived, accompanied her to the preoperative area where Dr. Reynolds and his team awaited. Exchanging a few quiet words of gratitude and reassurance with the doctor, Margaret prepared to confront the past embedded in her neck. Placing her fate in the hands of the medical team, after a difficult goodbye at the operating room doors, the delicate surgery began. Dr. Reynolds and his team worked with intense focus, eventually locating and successfully extracting the foreign object from Margaret's neck. The fragment was revealed to be a 3-inch piece of a military rifle, a shocking testament to a past she had carried for over 40 years. When Dr. Reynolds presented the sealed object to Claire in the waiting room, the physical evidence made her mother's hidden history devastatingly real. Hours later, Margaret awoke from the anesthesia, weak but relieved. Her first words were of a hard-won peace, believing the source of her physical and emotional burden had finally been removed. Claire, however, insisted that her mother's journey was not over, but just beginning. She encouraged Margaret to share her full story, to transform her long-held silence into a narrative that could finally be heard. For the first time in decades, Margaret felt a sense of liberation, touching the bandage on her neck not as a wound, but as a testament to her survival and a promise of a story yet to be fully told. In the quiet of her hospital room, Margaret confirmed to Claire that the physical pain had subsided, replaced by a profound emotional release. Dr. Reynolds arrived with significant news. Analysis confirmed the extracted metal fragment was part of an M16 rifle from the Vietnam War. Complete with a partial serial number, this provided the tangible, official proof Margaret had been denied for decades, validating her presence in the conflict zone. Days later, recovering at home, Margaret received a formal letter from the National Civilian Veterans Association. It offered a long-overdue apology and official recognition of her service. This acknowledgement allowed her to finally feel her fragmented past could be reassembled into a coherent whole. That evening, Claire asked to hear the full story. Margaret recounted her time as a young nurse in Vietnam, her secret romance with an American sergeant named Robert, and the traumatic attack that separated them. She revealed she had been told Robert died, a story she had carried alone upon returning to a disbelieving world. Now, with her history validated and her daughter by her side, Margaret expressed one final, lingering hope, to discover the true fate of Robert, wondering if he, too, had survived and lived with the same uncertainty. Claire, armed with the name, the old letter, and the new evidence, understood the next chapter of their journey was about to begin. Claire, determined to find answers about Robert Carter, immediately began her search. Official channels proved fruitless, with the Veterans Administration citing protocol and a lack of documentation to assist her. Undeterred, she turned to informal networks, posting Margaret's story and Robert's name on veterans forums. After 2 days, she received a response from a man named Frank Holloway, who had served at the same base. He confirmed he remembered both Margaret and Sergeant Carter, revealing the tragic misunderstanding. After the attack, Robert was told that Margaret had died. This revelation was a profound breakthrough. Margaret was deeply moved to learn that Robert had survived and had lived for decades under the same painful misconception. She entrusted Claire with one of the unsent letters she had written to him, a tangible piece of her enduring hope. Shortly after, an official invitation arrived for Margaret to be honored at a ceremony for forgotten civilian volunteers, finally granting her the recognition she had been denied for a lifetime. Margaret's quiet tears were not for the official recognition, but for the profound relief of finally being believed. This validation, coupled with the newfound hope of finding Robert, brought a sense of peace she had never known. Waking at dawn, she inspected her healing scar, feeling the physical weight of the past was finally gone, though a new anxiety about the future lingered. During a routine post-operative update, Dr. Reynolds delivered difficult news. The analysis of the tissue surrounding the fragment revealed severe cellular changes, a likely consequence of the body's decades-long struggle with the foreign object, which now presented a risk of cancer. While Margaret accepted this potential consequence with a weary calm, Claire was shaken by the revelation. Later, as they sat in the garden, Margaret expressed her only true regret, that she had not shared her truth with her daughter sooner, fearing it would have changed how Claire saw her. This moment highlighted the complex healing that lay ahead, beyond the physical scar. Claire reassured her mother that she would persist in the search for Robert, whether he was alive or not, vowing to ensure his story was told. This promise solidified their partnership in piecing together the past. Margaret confessed that instead of feeling empty after the fragment's removal, she finally felt whole. Meanwhile, the official biopsy results provided conclusive proof that the object was of ballistic origin, a rare medical case that underscored Margaret's decades of silent survival. As she continued her physical recovery at home, Claire intensified her search. Her breakthrough came when she discovered two previously unseen photographs of Margaret with Robert, which she shared online. Weeks later, a response arrived from a man named Eddie Carter, who believed the man in the photos was his father, a father who had always spoken of a nurse named Margaret he believed had died in the war. This message, suggesting Robert had survived and become a father, left both women profoundly shaken. Claire's determined search culminated in a meeting with Eddie Carter, Robert's son, who confirmed that his father had also lived for decades believing Margaret had died. The emotional reunion brought a profound sense of closure, underscored by a cassette tape on which Robert's voice confessed he had never forgotten her. This long-awaited connection finally released Margaret from the burden of doubt and pain she had carried. Her story then reached a public pinnacle when she was honored by the Civilian Veterans Association. In a moving speech, she transformed her personal scar into a powerful symbol of silenced histories, receiving long overdue recognition. This acknowledgement led to a news interview, where Margaret, once ignored, now had the opportunity to tell her story on her own terms, bringing a sense of justice and completion to her lifelong journey. Margaret's televised interview, where she recounted her experiences with poignant clarity, resonated across the country. Her story of carrying a war fragment for decades sparked a national conversation, drawing messages from countless others who had felt similarly silenced. This public recognition culminated in an official letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, finally granting her the formal acknowledgement she had been denied for a lifetime. Despite the influx of media attention, Margaret declined further interviews, choosing instead to focus on supporting others. She and Claire founded Silent Echo, a community group that connected with hundreds of forgotten individuals, offering them validation. Margaret meticulously preserved their stories, believing in the enduring power of physical records. While she found a new purpose, her body bore the lasting effects of her ordeal, with persistent pain a reminder of the past. In a deeply symbolic moment, an archivist delivered a newly declassified notebook belonging to Robert Carter, containing a poem that served as a final, poignant message from the man who had never forgotten her, bringing a sense of full-circle resolution to her long journey. Margaret's final days were marked by a quiet fading as dementia, accelerated by a lifetime of trauma, slowly clouded her memory. Claire devoted herself to her mother's care, using letters and Robert's recorded voice to provide comfort. Margaret passed away peacefully. Her long journey concluded with the serenity of knowing her story had finally been heard and her love for Robert had been real. Her legacy, however, endured and grew. Claire channeled her grief into action, expanding the Silent Echo project and authoring a book that immortalized her mother's experience. Margaret's story became a touchstone for countless other silenced voices, culminating in a permanent national memorial that honored her not just as an individual, but as a symbol for all who had carried invisible wounds. Through Claire's efforts, the woman who was once ignored became a lasting inspiration, ensuring that her pain fostered a movement of listening and recognition. She ran her fingers over the inscription, knelt before the sculpture and whispered, "You won, Mom, you won." Later that day, Claire was walking alone down a side hallway of the memorial when she encountered an elderly gentleman peering into one of the display cases. He wore a battered hat bearing the emblem of a military mission in Vietnam. She approached slowly. "Did you serve?" He nodded. "Yes, but no one knew until they read about your mother." Claire was moved. She served too, but she spent her life trying to prove she was real. The man smiled. "Now, no one can deny it anymore. She paved the way for all of us." Before he left, he handed Claire a small medal. "This was mine, but I think it belongs to her now." Claire accepted the gift and held it to her chest. In that moment, she understood what her mother planted was still blooming, even without her there to see it. Margaret was gone, but her story was a seed. A few weeks later, Claire returned to her childhood home. The place still smelled the same. The floors still creaked in the same places. She sat on the porch with a cup of tea and without realizing it began to speak aloud. "Remember when you said no one cared, that invisible pain was ignored? Well, now it has a name, Mom. It has a voice." The wind blew lightly, and for a second, Claire swore. She felt her mother's presence beside her, not like a ghost, but like a living part of that which never dies, the truth. And so ends the story of Margaret White, an ordinary woman forgotten by many, but remembered by everyone who heard it. She didn't change the world with weapons or speeches, she changed it with courage, with endured silence, with the decision to no longer hide her pain. She came into the hospital with a lump on her neck, and he left there with the country listening. If you've made it this far and this story touched your soul, comment courage below, because at the end of the day, what truly changes the world are the stories that have the courage to be told. That's all about our stories. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the story? Please share it in the comments below.